One heartbeat, then silence. 1,000 pounds of imperial prestige, unraveled by a rusted piece of plumbing pipe. It wasn't a tactical defeat. It was a systematic slaughter. How did the world's most efficient killing machine find itself being hunted? By a school teacher? The generals in Tokyo mapped every ridge. They calculated every bullet. They prioritized the procedure of the emperor over the reality of the mud. But they ignored the one variable that could actually kill them: the woman standing quietly at the chalkboard. They saw an invisible civilian. She saw a target list. Why did the most powerful empire in Asia surrender to a ghost they refused to acknowledge? The answer isn't in the classified vaults. It's in the ink-stained hands of a woman who stopped teaching history and started writing it in blood. Tacloban, Leyte, 1941. The air here used to be thick with the scent of sampaguita flowers and the dry white ghost of chalkboard dust. In a small classroom, Nieves Fernandez moves with a quiet, practiced grace. To her students, she is a pillar of order. She is the keeper of grammar, the arbiter of local history, the woman who believes that a well-sharpened pencil is the most powerful tool in the world. But outside, the world is losing its mind. The radio static brings news of fire and steel. Manila has fallen. The American protectors are retreating to the tunnels of Corregidor. And then, the sound arrives. Not the sound of books opening, but the rhythmic, bone-deep thud of jackboots on tropical soil. The Imperial Japanese Army enters Tacloban not as guests, but as owners. They do not see a community, they see a resource. They do not see people, they see subjects. The transition is a slow, agonizing suffocation. The schoolhouse, once a sanctuary of light, is requisitioned. The books Nieves loved are burned or censored. The rising sun flag is hoisted, casting a long crimson shadow over the playground. The Japanese High Command operates under a philosophy of absolute subjugation. Their military manuals are clear. Terror is a legitimate tool of administration. They believe that if you break the body, the spirit will follow. This is the crystallized arrogance of the empire. They formulated a statement that echoed through every occupied village. The Filipino people are a child race. They will obey because they have no choice but to fear our strength. They prioritize the procedure of the emperor over the sanctity of human life. And, for a while, it seems they are right. Nieves watches. She watches the soldiers take the rice from the mouths of children. She watches the comfort stations being established. She watches the men of her village, the fathers of her students, dragged into the jungle to dig their own graves. The friction begins here. The massive, industrial system of the empire is grinding against the fragile spirit of a school teacher. The system assumes she is a variable it has already solved. She is a woman. She is a civilian. She is just a teacher. But Nieves is an outlier. While the village elders speak of waiting for the Americans, Nieves realizes that the Americans are thousands of miles away, and the bayonet is right here, at her throat. The moment of transformation happens in the quiet of a humid evening. A Japanese officer, a man who embodies the cold precision of the occupation, confronts her in the square. He is polished, his katana a symbol of 1,000 years of warrior tradition. He looks at Nieves thin, unassuming, her hands stained with ink, and he laughs. He mocks her profession. He tells her that learning is a luxury for the conquered. He treats her silence as submission. He doesn't realize that in that silence, Nieves is no longer grading his speech. She is grading his life, and he has failed. She makes a choice that defies her nature. She goes to her kitchen, but she doesn't reach for a plate. She reaches for a bolo knife, a long curved blade used for clearing brush and harvesting sugar cane. It is a tool of the earth, not the armory. She walks into the jungle. The Japanese soldiers are equipped with the Type 38 Arisaka rifle. It is a masterwork of ballistics high velocity, incredible range, and a length that makes it look like a spear when the bayonet is fixed. It was designed for the sweeping plains of China and the open hills of Manchuria. But in the Leyte jungle, that engineering becomes a death sentence. The Arisaka is like a long cane in a narrow hallway. In the dense, vine-choked undergrowth, the 31-inch barrel catches on everything. To aim it, a soldier must have space. To fire it, he must have time. The bolt action is a mechanical marvel, but it requires a 3-step movement of the hand: a pull, a lift, a push. The fatal flaw is simple. The weapon is too perfect for a world that is messy. The bolo, however, requires no reloading. It does not jam. It does not need a clear line of sight. It is a silent extension of the arm. In the time it takes a Japanese sentry to untangle his rifle from a tropical fern, the blade has already found the gap in his armor. Nieves begins to build her classroom in the trees. She gathers the survivors, the farmers, the students, the broken men. She doesn't teach them poetry. She teaches them the pedagogy of steel. While the Japanese colonel in Tacloban sits in his office, confident that the insurgency is just a collection of disorganized bandits, Nieves is in the dark, refining a syllabus of blood. She creates a unit of 110 men. They call her the captain. The colonel treats the reports of missing patrols with a dismissive wave of his hand. He believes his men are superior. He believes the nanny from the schoolhouse is hiding in a cellar, weeping. He treats the silence of the jungle as the silence of a grave he has already dug for his enemies. But he has fatally underestimated his opponent. It wasn't surrender that he was hearing. It was the sharpening of 100 blades. It was the calm before a storm of iron and shadows. A storm led by the woman he had laughed at. The nanny was no longer teaching. She was preparing to remind the empire who was really in charge of the Leyte Ridges. The rising sun was about to meet the edge of a schoolteacher's justice. June 1943. The Leyte Mountains do not forgive, and they do not forget. The ridges are draped in a suffocating green velvet, a canopy so thick it swallows the sun before it can touch the forest floor. Here, the air is a wet blanket, smelling of rotting vegetation and the sharp ozone tang of an approaching monsoon. Deep within this emerald fortress, a new kind of academy is in session. Nieves Fernandez is no longer standing at a wooden podium. She is crouching in the mud, her floral dress stained with the red clay of the islands, her eyes reflecting the cold steel of the blade in her hand. Around her sit 110 men farmers who once plowed these fields, students who once memorized the poems she taught, and laborers whose backs were broken by the occupation. They call her the captain, but to Nieves they are still her pupils. Only now the curriculum has changed from arithmetic to asymmetric slaughter. The Imperial Japanese Army is a master of the open battlefield. They understand supply lines, artillery grids, and the hierarchy of the bayonet. They are a massive interconnected nervous system. But Nieves understands something they don't. A nervous system can be paralyzed by a single, well-placed needle. She doesn't try to build a traditional army. She builds a ghost. Her men are barefoot, moving through the razor grass with a silence that defies the senses. While the Japanese commanders wait for a proper engagement, Nieves is teaching her unit how to turn the everyday into the terminal. The centerpiece of her armory is the latong, the gas pipe shotgun. It is the ultimate rejection of industrial warfare. It starts with a length of discarded plumbing pipe, a crude wooden stock, and a simple sliding bolt tipped with a sharpened nail. The mechanic is brutally efficient. Input: a handmade shell filled with black powder and jagged shards of glass or scrap iron is loaded into the pipe. Black box. The user slams the pipe backward, forcing the primer onto the nail. Output: a wide screaming spray of hot metal that shreds everything within 20 feet. It is a weapon of the desperate for the lethal. It is a black box of death that requires no factory, no logistics, only a steady hand and the will to fire. The Japanese garrison in the valley below remains trapped in a state of crystallized arrogance. To them, a pipe is for water. A woman is for service. A farmer is for labor. They cannot fathom that these three elements have fused into a force that is methodically unzipping their perimeter. A young Japanese lieutenant, fresh from the academies in Kyoto, sits at his desk in the Tacloban outpost. He reads the reports of accidents on the mountain trails. A sentry found with his throat opened by a tool meant for clearing brush. A supply truck that simply vanished between two checkpoints. He scoffs. He writes a memo dismissing these incidents as the work of unorganized bandits and local predators. He treats the warnings of the elder villagers as superstition. He believes his uniform is armor enough against the primitive inhabitants of the heights. But he has fatally underestimated the predator. It wasn't a bandit waiting in the shadows. It was a woman who had spent a decade teaching children how to spot patterns. And now she is spotting the patterns in his patrols. She knows exactly when the sentry's eyes wander. She knows the exact moment the relief guard slows down to light a cigarette. While the lieutenant pours his tea, confident in the superiority of his training, Nieves is already in the dark, holding the silence that will soon claim his life. The nanny isn't hiding. She's grading his mistakes. And he is about to fail his final exam. The terror Nieves unleashes is psychological as much as it is physical. She understands that an army that cannot see its enemy will eventually start to see them everywhere. She coordinates her barefoot army with the precision of a master conductor. They strike from the blind spots of the Imperial manuals. They don't attack the front of the column. They take the man at the very back, so quietly that the man in front doesn't notice until he turns around to find a ghost. Nieves herself is the most terrifying element of this jungle pedagogy. She is a paradox in motion. She still wears the dresses of a civilian, a visual anchor to the life she lost. But the way she moves, it is the calculated lethality of a surgeon. She keeps a ledger. In her classroom, she used it to track attendance and grades. Now, she uses it to log the deaths of her enemies. She marks each one with the same meticulousness she used for a spelling test. Each entry is a life taken to ensure her village survives another night. The friction between the human spirit and the massive system is now a white-hot spark. The Japanese Empire has poured billions into its conquest. It has ships, planes, and tanks. But Nieves has the jungle, and she has the invisible agency of a woman the world decided to ignore. The garrison begins to fracture. The soldiers, once proud and disciplined, are now jumping at the sound of a falling branch. They stop venturing into the trees. They huddle in their fortified bunkers, realizing that the map they were given is a lie. The ridges of Leyte don't belong to the emperor. They belong to the schoolteacher. But the system isn't finished. Stung by the mounting losses, the Japanese high command stops laughing. They realize this isn't just a nuisance, it is a hemorrhage. They respond the only way a massive system knows how, with overwhelming, indiscriminate force. They put a price on her head, $10,000, a fortune in the ruins of the war. They believe that if they offer enough money, the underdogs will betray their leader. They believe greed is more powerful than the spirit of resistance. They don't realize that Nieves Fernandez didn't just teach these men how to fight. She taught them how to be a nation. As the monsoon rains begin to wash the blood from the leaves, the hunt intensifies. The hammer of the empire is coming down, searching for the ghost in the floral dress. But the schoolteacher has one more lesson to deliver. A lesson about the cost of arrogance and the weight of a $10,000 bounty on a head that refuses to bow. The jungle exhales a cold, wet mist. Somewhere in the green dark, the click of a gas pipe shotgun echoes like a final period at the end of a sentence. The exam has begun. October 1944. The horizon is no longer green. It is a jagged, mechanical gray. 400 ships of the United States 7th Fleet are tearing through the surf of Leyte Gulf. The air is shredded by the thunder of 16-inch guns. The Great Crusade has arrived to reclaim the archipelago. General Douglas MacArthur stands on the deck, preparing his famous walk into the shallows, preparing to tell the world that he has returned. But as the steel ramps of the landing craft drop, the American GIs find a reality that isn't in their briefing books. They expect to find a broken, starving population cowering under the Japanese boot. Instead, they find the silent ridges. They find roads already cleared of mines. They find a Japanese garrison that is already a hollowed-out shell, paralyzed by an enemy they never saw coming. And then, she emerges. Nieves Fernandez walks out of the emerald dark. She isn't wearing a uniform. She doesn't have medals. She is wearing a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her hands still stained with the smoke of a gas pipe shotgun. She carries her bolo like a tired mother carries a child. The Americans are stunned. They look at the $10,000 bounty posters the Japanese left behind, posters for the ghost of Leyte. And then they look at the schoolteacher. This is the visceral peak of the paradox. The most powerful military system on Earth has arrived with $1 billion of hardware to save a woman who has already spent 2 years methodically dismantling an empire with scrap metal and silence. The climax isn't a massive tank battle. It is the moment the American officers realize that while they were planning their grand return, Nieves was already there, holding the world together with a blade. But here's the cruel irony. As the cameras flash and MacArthur makes his speech on the beach, the Waltham captain quietly begins to fade. The official records of the Great Crusade are written by men in air-conditioned rooms. They speak of divisions, of naval maneuvers, and of strategic liberation. They do not know how to categorize a woman who took 200 lives with a kitchen tool. Nieves Fernandez does not ask for a commission in the new army. She does not ask for a pension or a seat at the victory table. She does not wait for the system to validate her. She turns her back on the smoking ruins of the war and walks back toward Tacloban. She returns to her classroom. She picks up the chalk. She tries to scrub the red clay of the ridges from her fingernails. But the silence of the schoolroom is different now. The desks are empty of the children who didn't survive. The chalkboard is a mirror reflecting the faces of the men she logged in her ledger of death. She spent 2 years as a predator to ensure her students could one day be citizens, but the system she saved has no room for her legend. To the new government, she is a liability, a reminder of a violence they want to forget. To the history books, she is a footnote. To the world, she is just a teacher again. We are left with the bitter aftertaste of a victory that belongs to the invisible. Nieves Fernandez lived out her days in the quiet of a country that moved on without her. She took the weight of those 200 deaths and carried them in silence, while the men who arrived late took the credit for the peace. They claimed the victory was a triumph of industrial might. They claimed the system won, but the truth is written in the soil of Leyte. Do we see this same hubris in our society today? We still look at the underdogs, the teachers, the caregivers, the quiet observers, and we assume they are passive. We assume that power only exists in the massive system. We forget that when a system fails, it is always the invisible individual who steps into the gap. How many more ordinary souls are holding our world together right now with invisible, violent courage, only to fade into the footnotes of time? History is not made by the men on the posters. It is made in the dark by the people we have the audacity to ignore. If you believe that stories like Nieves Fernandez's deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing and leave a like. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.